The top business stories live from the Sky newsroom. The cost of borrowing set to fall its lowest level in more than 18 months. Plans to slash red tape to build new nuclear reactors. Plus, healthy profits at the UK's biggest company, AstraZeneca, thanks to strong sales of its cancer treatments. Yeah, very good morning and welcome to Business Live on this Thursday with me, Darren McCaffrey. We're going to start with some breaking news in the last couple of minutes this morning. That is in regards to the Chief Executive of HSBC and how much he's going to be paid. Let's bring in Mark Kleiman, our City editor, who has the scoop for us this morning. Mark, what's happening?
Yeah, that's right, Darren. Some significant news about HSBC, Europe's biggest lender by market capitalisation. The new chief executive, Georges Elhedery, took over the role in September last year. And as I understand it this morning, the bank is finalising plans to pay him a maximum remuneration package of just over £15 million from this year onwards. Now, that is a maximum sum rather than a target or a guaranteed amount of money, but it's a significant increase on what he's been paid or eligible for to date. He only took over the role a few months ago, as I say. He was appointed last July to replace Noel Quinn, but by my calculations, his current maximum pay as the chief executive was in the region of £10.5 to £11 million. And I think what this suggests, given that we were reporting a similar piece of news on Barclays and NatWest in recent weeks, Darren, is that we are now entering a more permissive environment for bank bosses' pay in the UK, certainly compared to most of the period since the financial crisis of 2008. Now, Mr. Elhedery is going to be the CEO, or is the CEO now, of Europe's biggest bank, but he still won't be paid as much as some of his continental peers. And if you look also at the amounts of money paid to the bosses of the big US banks, so for example, Brian Moynihan, the chief executive of Charlotte, North Carolina-based Bank of America, who earned $29 million just over a year ago. JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley all pay their chief executives significantly higher sums. And this forms part of a narrative that we're seeing at the moment from London-listed companies which are trying to make pay packages for their bosses more competitive, more internationally competitive at a time of searching questions being asked about the attractiveness of the London stock market.
OK, Mark, great stuff. If you want more from Mark, of course, don't forget to check out the business section on the Sky News website or indeed on the Sky app. Mark Kleiman there with that breaking news this hour. Now, let's return to our top story. Interest rates, of course, big day for the Bank of England. Normally that comes with a amount of certainty and jeopardy, but today it seems that we think we know what's going to happen, and that is that interest rates are going to be cut, with potentially more to come this year. Analysts predict the bank will cut the UK's base interest rate from 4.75% to 4.5%, which would be the lowest in more than 18 months. It could go even further, though, maybe cut it by 0.5%. Let's get more on this. Speak to Max Shepherd, Group Economist at the Yorkshire Building Society. Very good morning to you, Max. What's your prediction? Are we looking at 0.25% cut today?
Thank you. Good morning. Yes, we are. So the market at the moment expects maybe 95% chance of a 0.25% cut this afternoon, getting us to 4.5%. And then thereafter, they expect maybe 3 or 4 cuts, including this one, for the remainder of this year.
And Max, why is that? Why is the bank going to cut rates today?
So they think they've got a much better grip on inflation now versus where we were 12 months ago. So at the moment, the year-on-year inflation rate is 2.5%. Obviously, the inflation target is 2%. Although that is expected to rise a little bit, maybe up to around 3% mark in April 2025, I think they've done the hard yards. So therefore, cutting interest rates now to something slightly less restrictive is an appropriate sort of path for base rate.
And there is clearly also concern about growth, isn't there? I mean, the forecasts for this year in terms of growth are not where they were even just a couple of months ago.
Yes, there is. So we saw 2 consecutive months of contraction in September and October in terms of GDP. November was positive at 0.1%, but slightly behind where the markets expected it to be. So we are expecting growth. 1.3% is the current market expectation for 2025. So therefore, they're trying to get ahead of the curve and try and cut rates a little bit to try and stimulate the economy.
And what's fascinating about this is how quickly kind of things have changed. I remember not that long ago, the back half of last year, suggesting that actually there might be only one cut this year, if at all. And actually, where we sit today, in early February, the expectation is that we could see 2, 3, maybe more interest rate cuts this year.
Yes, yeah, exactly. The markets are quite fickle and often changing their mind based on data that's coming out and guidance from the Bank of England. I think what has been changing in recent months is Andrew Bailey has consistently said a gradual reduction in interest rates remains appropriate. And I think what the market is inferring from that is gradual, meaning quarterly interest rate cuts, providing the data continues on the path that it is doing at the moment.
And just in terms of the macro economy, the wider economy, this has consequences, doesn't it? Particularly this effort to try and find growth, because it's going to have a big impact on the public finances and decisions that the Chancellor is going to have to make in the not too distant future.
So interest rates falling is a positive for the Chancellor in that it reduces that debt servicing cost, which is key. But as you said, they are really keen on getting growth stimulating, and interest rates today going downwards should be a positive step towards that.
And just finally, Max, what's your sense of where the MPC, the Monetary Policy Committee, will end up in terms of the division, if you like, that we always talk about between those that want to go further and those that actually think maybe that 0.25% is enough?
Yeah, that's the golden question. So as it stands, we probably expect Catherine Mann, who at the moment is the most hawkish of the members. She is the most likely to want to leave rates unchanged, but we expect a vote of 8-1, and that's the market expectation. But anything either side of that, so a 9 votes for cuts, or conversely 7-2 or 6-3 vote, would ultimately would change the interest rate expectations going forwards. So we'd wait and see.
Indeed. Midday, we're going to get the answers to those questions. Max, appreciate your time this morning. Max Shepherd there from the Yorkshire Building Society. So it seems that it could be bad news for savers, but a series of rate cuts would be, of course, good news for many with a mortgage. Let's speak to David Hollingsworth. He's Associate Director at L&C Mortgages. David, very good morning to you. Let's start, if we can, with mortgages, particularly those that got a tracker mortgage. Today clearly would be good news, wouldn't it, if we do see a cut at midday?
Exactly that. They'll be the immediate beneficiaries because they'll know that their mortgage rate is directly pegged to the base rate. So any cut today will soon feature into their mortgage payments and bring those down. But a lot of people, of course, are fixed in. They've locked their rate in over the last few years. And so therefore there'll be no immediate impact, but this will spell positive news for them in the longer run.
Yeah, which is really interesting because I think I read today, David, that there are maybe 629,000, it's a very precise figure, isn't it? But that's what I read, who will be immediately impacted. I think saving on average £29 per month. But as you've rightly pointed out, there are millions of other mortgage holders who actually won't be immediately impacted because their rates are already set for a period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. But we know that there's a huge number. Estimates are around 1.8 million fixed rate mortgages will come to an end this year. So there'll be a lot of borrowers who are very eagerly watching what the MPC does and will be listening to the kind of projections that Max just outlined around how many cuts we might expect. Now that spells good news because it should start to bring fixed rate mortgages down. We've had a kind of jittery start to the year. Fixed rates at the end of last and into the early stages of this year were just edging up a little bit. But actually, the better than expected inflation data has helped markets just ease back a little bit. So we've seen this week a few lenders looking to reflect that in their mortgage deals and just bring fixed rates down. So as we get further into the year and hopefully see these base rate cuts start to take hold, we should see more attractive fixed rates coming to market.
And just
finally, a lot of people are locked in.
Yeah, and just finally, David, we talk a lot about mortgages. There are a lot of people who don't have mortgages. There are a lot of people who are savers. And the last couple of years have actually been quite good for them. But the tide may be turning.
Yeah, look, for good news for mortgage borrowers, which is obviously what we're interested in, but that can spell worse news for savers. But there are a lot of people who are still locked into very low mortgage rates, and they will have been saving, hopefully, over that period. So it was only at the end of 2021 when rates started to shift upwards from their ultra low levels. So some borrowers will be coming to the end of very low fixed rates this year. Others may have fixed in after the mini budget and face much higher rates, so they'll be glad to see the back of those rates. But for savers, it could mean that rates start to drop a little.
OK, David, thank you very much indeed. That's David Hollingworth from L&C Mortgages. And just to remind you that we have got a special programme on this very issue at 4:30 this afternoon. Business Live, a Q&A special on interest rates. We want to hear from you. We want to have your questions put to a panel of experts. All you need to do is scan that QR code that you can see on your screen right now to get in touch. And do join us at 4:30 this afternoon. Just going to bring you some breaking news coming into Sky Centre in the last couple of minutes, and that is from President Trump writing on Truth Social about Gaza. This is what he's had to say. He said the Gaza Strip would be turned over to the United States by Israel at the conclusion of fighting. The Palestinians, people like Chuck Schumer, would have already been resettled in far safer and more beautiful communities with new and modern homes in the region. They will actually have a chance to be happy, safe and free. The US, working with great development teams from all over the world, would slowly and carefully begin the construction of what will become one of the greatest and most spectacular developments of its kind on Earth. No soldiers by the US would be needed. Stability for the region would reign. So Donald Trump just putting that out on Truth Social, talking there about his very, very controversial statement the other night, as you can see, alongside the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, talking about his plans for Gaza. Interesting for me, he's suggesting that the Gaza Strip would be turned over to the United States by Israel, but he's ruling out the suggestion that soldiers, US soldiers, would be needed. Still talking about how there would be modern homes, a beautiful community, very much talking about as a kind of a construction czar that he has been in the past in that regard. But clearly, a lot of people, not least of all, a lot of Arab leaders, a lot of Palestinians, very, very unhappy, very angry at President Trump's statements. He is suggesting, though, that this is his plan for Gaza. And we will have more on this story at the news just after midday with Gareth. But that statement from Donald Trump coming out on Truth Social, saying no soldiers by the United States would be needed, stability for the region would reign. OK, let's bring you up to date with some of the rest of the business stories now, if we can. And the drug maker AstraZeneca has said that revenues jumped by almost a fifth in the past year amid strong sales of its cancer treatment. The UK's biggest company revealed that total revenues increased by 18% to $54.1 billion in 2024, compared with the previous year. It came on the back of a 24% rise in the sales of oncology treatments for cancer patients. A record low number of businesses were created across the UK in the final quarter of last year, according to new figures. The Institute of Directors described the fall as concerning and called on the government to ease what it called significant pressures on business. It follows this week's forecast from the EY Item Club that the UK economy will improve more slowly than anticipated this year, downgrading the Chancellor Rachel Reeves' hopes of rapid boost to growth. OK, you're watching Business Live here on Sky News. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, we're going to be looking at how the markets are reacting. The FTSE at a record high today ahead of that interest rate decision. We'll be explaining why after this quick commercial break.
It's like a football final with only one team on the pitch. This isn't just a call to vote, but a call to remember. The freedom fought for by the African National Congress.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa.
A cyclone and 2 burst dams wiped out hundreds of generational homes.
This was the second dam that the floodwaters hit before it tore into Derna. We are in the heart of Nairobi, and we're watching as protesters were heavily tear gassed.
The sheer fearlessness and persistence of these guys is astonishing.
We help you understand the world with us. I remember going into the iconic Omdurman market in the heart of Sudan's capital for the first time since the war started. And this is what's left of it. Bullet holes through buildings, shelled balconies, bullet cases on the floor. I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories and the lives of millions of people. This is insane. This was a bustling residential area. So many friends who lived here. My most memorable interview was with a 15-year-old boy who'd survived being stranded on a migrant boat on its way from Senegal to the Canary Islands.
After 13 days, our food, water and fuel supply ran out.
I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News, get the full story first. Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky News.
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
Free wherever you get your news.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
Slide minutes, slide better. Fly Emirates, fly better.
Very welcome back to Business Live. Now, planning rules are to be ripped up to make it easier to build new nuclear reactors and create thousands of highly skilled jobs. The reforms are the latest in a series of government proposals designed to get Britain building to help grow the economy. The UK was the first country, of course, in the world to develop a nuclear reactor, but the last time a power station was built, well, that was 1995. Let's speak to Julia Pike, Chief Executive at Sizewell C, which, of course, is under construction in Suffolk. Julia, very good morning to you. I assume this is news that you welcome today, these efforts by the government to make things like building nuclear reactors a lot easier.
Yeah, I think it's really great news. You know, the country needs nuclear alongside a lot of renewables, and it's great news that the government's looking at making it easier to build it, yeah.
Why do you say it needs nuclear?
Because if we want abundant energy in the UK, you know, we want enough electricity for our industry. We want people to have access to electricity whenever they need it. We want to have electricity to meet the growing needs of AI and a sort of more data-centred economy. And so that means we need a lot more electricity, you know, more for 2030 and then a lot more again for 2050. And nuclear makes a really great contribution to that because as well as providing stable, you know, non-weather dependent electricity alongside a growing renewable sector, it also gives rise to huge growth. You know, we give rise to tens of thousands of jobs. We have very high UK content, and our jobs are really good jobs. You know, we enable people to have careers. We're great for growth, and you know, for Sizewell C, which is the next step, we've actually got our consents and we can get going in this Parliament. We've already got 1,000 people on site. So it's important both for electricity and also because it's a great contribution to growth.
In saying that, I mean, were you frustrated? Have you been frustrated about some of the rules and regulations, some of the red tape, if you like, around kind of the nuclear sector?
I think in the UK, we have an awful lot of rules and regulations. You know, on one hand, we're very lucky to live in a democracy, and I'm not somebody who says, you know, let's slash and burn and override people's democratic rights. And of course, we are extremely focused on safety. But yes, it does take a long time to get through the planning process. And I think if there are things that can be done to achieve a better balance, so we've got a really good balance between, on the one hand, the need to actually get stuff built, and on the other hand, of course, environmental protection, safety, and respecting people's democratic rights. And that can only be a good thing for all of us.
In saying that, I'm seeing that the cost of Sizewell C has doubled since 2020 in the last 5 years. Going to cost apparently nearly £40 billion. It's a hell of a lot of money.
The cost of Sizewell C hasn't doubled, and the really important thing about Sizewell C is that it's going to reduce consumers' bills. So it'll cost a little bit in the construction period every month on people's bills, and then when it's operational, which will be for 60, could be 80, could be for even longer, it's going to bring down the cost of electricity. And of course, for every pound you spend on construction in the UK, gives rise to round about £2.90, so nearly £3 of additional benefit to the economy. So in many ways, building something like Sizewell is a huge investment.
No doubt it's a huge investment, a hugely expensive one, it seems, too. I mean, you're saying it's not doubled. Has it gone up in price?
We've seen inflation, but we're not going to get into sort of exactly what does it cost, because I think what we really need to focus on is what's the impact on bills, which is to put them down, what's the impact on growth, which is to put it up, and what's the impact on people's lives, which is to have a lot of abundant electricity.
Isn't the UK taxpayer funding part of Sizewell C?
Sizewell C will ultimately be paid for, like all electricity generation and indeed all transmission lines. All of these things are paid for by consumers. In terms of who puts up the money up front, it will be a mix of EDF, incoming private sector shareholders. There's a capital raise going on at the moment, and then the government's going to keep a stake, which I think is a great thing, because I think people on the whole like the government to be involved in nuclear.
So then shouldn't we know how much it's going to cost then? Shouldn't we know how much it's going to cost?
Well, there is a correlation between putting out cost estimates in public and then budgets overrunning. So if you look, for example, at HS1, the chairman of HS1 said in the Times a couple of months ago that he attributed HS1, so the Channel Tunnel Rail Link, he attributed that coming in on time and on budget, in part due to not actually publishing the cost and schedule estimates. And then if you look at where cost and schedule estimates are quite frequently published, like for Crossrail and for HS2, I think it's hard to say that publication has helped those projects stay within time and budget. So I'm really, really focused on driving down the cost of building Sizewell to the lowest they can be, taking account of our need to obviously build safely, to quality, and to protect the environment. And that's really where my focus is, and on creating growth and on providing abundant electricity for the UK.
Well, on that, we can definitely all agree. So good luck with it all. Julia, as always, appreciate your time this morning. Thank you very much indeed, Julia Pike there, the Chief Executive of Sizewell C. OK, let's look at the markets on this Thursday morning. And FTSE has hit a record high, as you can see, up 1.12% ahead of the expected Bank of England's interest rate cuts at midday. But that does mean it has had an impact on sterling, with the pound down against the dollar at 1.24 and also down against the euro at €1.20. Let's speak to Rachel Winter, partner at Killick & Co. Rachel, good morning to you. We await this decision, but it has had an impact not just on the FTSE, but clearly on sterling too.
Yeah, so when you expect interest rates to come down, which people do today, we are expecting a 0.25% reduction in interest rates. That makes it a little bit less attractive to hold your money in sterling because you're getting a lesser interest rate, and therefore you tend to see sterling weakening. And that, as you have alluded to, has then had a knock-on impact on the FTSE. So the FTSE 100 index here in the UK is mainly full of big international companies that earn their revenue overseas, especially in dollars. So when you've got weaker sterling, these companies are earning their revenue in dollars, they're converting that into sterling on the balance sheet, and it looks more valuable when you've got weaker sterling. So you always tend to find that the FTSE goes up when sterling is weak.
Let's talk about AstraZeneca. We mentioned a little earlier on in the programme. They've had quite a good end to 2024, Britain's largest company.
Yeah, so this is the largest company in the FTSE 100. They have had a good set of results this morning. I think the main headline is that revenue for the final quarter was up 18%. That was great to see. And they've also announced an increase in the dividend. So that's something that UK investors really like. So the shares are up over 5% this morning. And I think that will be contributing to the fact that the FTSE has gone up today. I think with AstraZeneca, some investors have been concerned about the situation in China. So the company had been accused of underpaying some tax because of its Chinese business. But the situation has been a little bit opaque. And I think because of that, some investors had feared the worst and had sold the shares. So we had seen a bit of a decline there last year. But in the update this morning, the company has suggested that perhaps the situation there is not as bad as some may have feared. And I think that too has contributed to the shares coming up this morning.
Now, talk to me about Compass Group. They are quite a big group that most people have probably never heard of, but they may well have eaten their products, if you like.
Yes, so this is another FTSE 100 company. They're actually the world's largest catering company. So they produce a lot of food for schools and for offices, for events. They've had a really good run, so the share price is up about 44% over the last 2 years. And one of the main reasons for that is that a lot of people have been returning to the office post-COVID and buying from the office canteen rather than going out because they want to save money. So that's really helped Compass. The shares actually are down a little bit this morning post the results. I don't think that's because the results were concerning. I think it's simply that the shares hit a record high earlier this week and some people are now taking a bit of profit.
And just very finally, Rachel, we have to end on diamonds, don't we? And it seems that Anglo-American are going to mine fewer diamonds because there's actually a bit less demand. Why have people gone off diamonds? Or is it that the synthetic stuff's actually quite good?
Well, it's a bit of both. So you've had a real improvement in the quality of synthetic diamonds. They are a lot cheaper than so-called real diamonds. So that has really brought down the prices overall. And also previously, I think De Beers has sold a lot of diamonds into China. The Chinese economy has been weak over the last couple of years, and there has been a reduction in demand for diamonds coming from China. So for those two reasons, De Beers has been struggling a bit.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. I mean, you know, if they want to mine a diamond for me, I'm not going to complain. But there you go. Rachel, really appreciate your time this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
OK, that is it from me on Business Live for the moment. Don't forget, we've got a special programme, by the way, at 4:30 this afternoon. We want you to submit your questions on interest rates. We've got a panel of experts who are going to try and answer them. And that is because we're expecting that interest rate decision from the Bank of England coming up in just a couple of minutes, bang on midday. The expectation is that they will cut interest rates by 0.25%. Good for mortgage holders, not great for savers, but a sign of the UK's struggling economy. We'll have full details with Paul Kelso and Ed Conway and break that news at midday here on Sky News. Stay tuned for that. And if not, do join us also at 4:30 this afternoon.